let's now dive into some receivers. This is actually a sneaky, very loaded wide receiver waiver wire here in week 12, starting with Khalil Shakir, a guy we've talked about multiple weeks here, continuing to show out. He's now had 70% or more routes in 4 straight weeks without knocks, who's still, as of today, very much up in the air. They said they have no timetable on his returns, making this offense far more explosive, far more fast-paced here with Khalil Shakir and nearly exclusively 3 wide receiver sets they're running right now. And he's got now Shakir 15, 10, 3 a dud, and then 21 points his last game out. So he's been a top 25 wide receiver in 3 of his last 4 games. He's outscored Gabe Davis in 3 of those 4 games. And his last one was the best one yet. 4 targets, 3 catches, 115 yards, and a score, juking out the entire defense, doing a ton of damage after the run, 14% target share, 16 total targets across those 4 games. Any steady usage with Josh Allen within this Bills offense is very much worth noting, in my opinion. Shakir's getting it done really, really well. So I love adding him. Right ahead of him, though, in terms of what I think is a much higher ceiling, is Jameson Williams. 20% rostered right now. I think you could bid maybe 8 to 10% on Shakir. You bump that up to 10, 15, maybe even 20%. If you're looking for a high upside, you don't really necessarily need to trust him this week. This is the type of guy, again, in a week where there's no teams on bye right now, that you can actually get away with stashing Jameson Williams. Let's see if this role continues to evolve on Thanksgiving Day here. He saw a career high. This is the biggest note on him. Sure, the touchdown catch was nice. 44 yards, a score, 2 catches, 32 of those on the touchdown on the deep shot. But what we really like to see here with Jameson Williams is the 66% route share. That is a career high so far. He had never played above 55% in his career, and he really showed out here with that, again, that 12 PPR point day, the wide receiver 23 of the week. What you really notice, though, is just one, why did he get more opportunity? Well, Dan Campbell shouted out all week a huge block that Jameson Williams threw on week 10, and that he's been more selfless type of team player, really going hard at practice. So they really have been hyping up Jameson Williams, and they responded by giving him the opportunity, and he delivered. You could just tell that this offense had a different gear when he was in there, especially when they were in comeback mode. They had to erase a 12-point deficit in about a 5-minute span here, and he was a huge part of that, scoring one of the go-ahead touchdowns to get them within striking distance. So sure, it's still tricky to really trust a guy that's 9% target share or worse in his last 4 games. I understand that, but just seeing the involvement, getting him on the field is step one. We're seeing that more often. Now he's making big plays, whether it's in helping in the run game, touchdowns that put his team ahead. This is, again, one of the most freakish athletes in college. We've talked about him multiple times earlier this year. 97th percentile size, speed, score. People compared him to Tyreek Hill coming out in terms of his ability to wreck a game. We saw it time and time again at Alabama. Maybe he can get his legs under him and have a strong finish to his sophomore campaign that propels him to future greatness. Of all the guys on this list, he certainly has the highest ceiling that we're going to talk about. But in terms of not much ceiling, but a really nice floor, if you're looking for something usable on your waiver wire, Demario Douglas, a lot of people dropping him. He had 36% ownership, now down to 32% rostership right now. That's probably because the Pats were on a bye, but that makes people forgetting that he had a 9-target day, 6 catches and 84 yards their last time out against the Colts. That was a 36% target share. Since Bourne went down, Demario Douglas has led this receiving corps quite easily, quite handedly, with a 25% target share. And in that span, 8, 11, and 14 PPR points. Not bad. I mean, again, not a great ceiling here, but wide receiver 22 and wide receiver 24, and very, very steady slot-based role here that we've seen time and time again produce some nice, consistent numbers. I understand with Demario Douglas that this touchdown equity is almost non-existent. Wouldn't be shocked at all if this guy doesn't score a single touchdown all year, just like Jacoby Myers used to be in this offense. But Jacoby Myers, before him, Julian Edelman and Welker, those guys that were monsters. But Jacoby Myers even, consistently top 24 wide receiver weeks on the backs of tons and tons of volume. So I think 9 to 12 targets a week, right around that 6 to 7 catch, 60 to 80 yards. I think you're going to settle into a nice role there, Demario Douglas. So if you need something, look at Pop here. It's a one guy in this Pats offense that is actually worth a meaningful look, besides maybe the running backs there as well. But after him, I really, really like Jayden Reed, 36% rostered, back-to-back 19 PPR fantasy points day, wide receiver 11 and wide receiver 12 in those 2 weeks, 14% and 15% target share. But the big thing was watching after an odd, weird, 56% of the routes 2 weeks ago. When that's why, despite him putting up 19 points, he's like, this is a mirage. Is he really going to get the field time? Boom, spikes up to a second on the team, 79% of the routes. Ultimately paved the way as a rusher as well. So let's talk about that. 4 catches, 46 yards through the air on 6 targets, which was second behind only Romeo Doubs. And then 3 carries for 46 yards and a score. That was really impressive. And actually, he ran the ball only twice in the first 10 weeks, but all 3 of these carries happened before either running back was injured. So sure, you can look at it like, hey, Aaron Jones is hurt. That's why this was a designed part of the game plan. And now that Aaron Jones is hurt, what if Jayden Reed becomes even more schematically used here? What if he does approach the easy comparison here that everybody wants to always find the next Deebo Samuel? But hey, there's a very big opening here in this backfield. And I know they said Aaron Jones's injury isn't hugely serious right now, but probably going to miss Thanksgiving Day at minimum. And that's another way that they can get Jayden Reed the ball. He has been so dangerous, made so many plays. A lot of people clamoring, one of my favorite experts out there, Matt Harmon, talking about how they should make him the focal point of this passing game, and they're starting to do so. I really, really like Jayden Reed. He's my number 4 guy, I think worth 20, 25%. He's similar. He's kind of like a mix of Jameson Williams and Demario Douglas that we just talked about in terms of ceiling and floor. He's going to get a good amount of weekly involvement, but also has that big play upside to break the long ones and do some real damage. So I love Jayden Reed. And in most weeks, he'd be my number 1 waiver wire receiver. But there is a guy that, call it a gut, call it a hinge, call it just past love, that I can't get over. My number 1 waiver wire receiver of week 12 is Odell Beckham Jr. 30% rostered right now. I think he should bid 35%, maybe even more if you need it. He just goes for 7 targets, 4 catches, 116 yards. Has a little bit of a shoulder injury, but they said no big deal there. Week before that, week 10, 40-yard touchdown. Nice to see. Week before that, 50-yard touchdown. Beautiful to see. He has now been the wide receiver 10, wide receiver 30, and wide receiver 18 across these last 3 weeks. And what's different? Well, Odell himself saying, they rested me in weeks 3 and 4, let me get my legs under me. Early in the season, I was hurt. I couldn't be myself. I didn't have the explosion. I couldn't move the way that I wanted to. I don't think people knew what I was dealing with. It's hard for me to speak about. Don't want to keep talking about it. But moving forward, being the very best I can for this team. And he kind of just chuckled when they said, well, do you think you got the speed back? And he just said, let's ask the other teams. He's got that swag back. He's got the speed back. We've seen it time and time again. Odell just make these crazy stretch runs. And now with no Mark Andrews, they're really going to be relying on him as a veteran presence, somebody to step up, because he's been doing this damage. And let me reiterate, wide receiver 10, 30, and 18, 17, 11, and 16 PPR fantasy points in those games. He's been doing that despite only running 66%, 40%, and 52% of the routes. Pretty much a part-time player. They're not going to have the flexibility to make him a part-time player moving forward. They need as many playmakers on this field as they can get with Mark Andrews out. So I think a step up in terms of usage and volume. I don't expect these type of big plays to go anywhere. The Odell Beckham show is back. They have a great schedule down the stretch here too. I do think guys like Bateman, Aguilar, maybe they make fringe ads here, but it's definitely Beckham. I think Zay Flowers as well. Of course, you're not on your waiver wires, but I think those two between Zay and Beckham. And just for the record, Beckham has outscored Zay in 2 of those last 3 games as well. Is he going to be the number 1 receiver here? Maybe. So we shall see. But I think he is primed and ready for one of those heroic stretch run wide receivers. It happens every year. One guy just goes completely nuclear for multiple games and just carries fantasy owners. I really do think Odell Beckham has that upside to be that guy for 2023. So if you need a wide receiver, he is your number 1 ad. He is your top play. What is up, you fantasy wolf? Thanks so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, share your thoughts in the comments. Check out some more videos and join the newest Wolfpack by subscribing below.